February 28, 2026. A single post from Donald Trump just shattered the Middle East. Khamenei is dead. While Tehran remains in a chilling silence, 200 Israeli jets have reportedly turned the Iranian command structure into ashes. Is this the end of the regime, or the start of World War III? Today we go inside the shadows of the most dangerous 24 hours in modern history. This is Global Alert 24H. U.S. President Donald Trump stated that Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed in coordinated U.S. and Israeli strikes carried out on Saturday. Hours later, Iranian state media officially confirmed his death and announced a 40-day national mourning period across the country. In an earlier statement, President Trump declared, "Khamenei, one of the most evil individuals in history, is dead." This is not only justice for the Iranian people, but for great Americans and people across many nations who were killed or maimed by Khamenei and his bloodthirsty thugs. Prior to the confirmation, Iranian spokespersons insisted that both the Supreme Leader and President Masoud Pezeshkian were safe and unharmed, calling reports of Khamenei's death psychological warfare. Khamenei had previously been targeted in Israeli operations. In January, he faced one of the most serious challenges to his authority since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, as mass protests shook cities across Iran, triggering a legitimacy crisis for the regime. According to President Trump's public post, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has died following what Israeli officials describe as a sweeping air campaign inside Iran. Israeli sources are claiming a large-scale operation that struck roughly 500 targets, air defenses, missile sites, IRGC command centers, and other strategic assets, and say several senior regime figures were killed. Israeli officials also say they have recovered a photograph of Khamenei's body. Videos and posts circulating online show scenes of jubilation in some places and armed mobilization in others. None of these items have been independently verified. To be clear, the central claim, that Khamenei is dead, is being asserted by President Trump and supported by Israeli statements and unverified media. It is not an independently confirmed fact in multiple neutral sources at this time. If those claims are true, the implications are enormous. First, a brief primer on why the Supreme Leader matters. In Iran's constitutional structure, the Supreme Leader is far more than a ceremonial head. He appoints the commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, the heads of the judiciary and key security organs, and exerts decisive control over foreign and security policy. The presidency in Tehran manages much of day-to-day government, but ultimate authority rests with the Supreme Leader. Removing that person, suddenly and violently, would not simply change a name in a headline. It would remove the central node that holds multiple power networks together. Operationally, the reported strikes are described as unusually large in scale. Israeli sources characterize them as simultaneous hits on air defenses, missile depots, command centers, and facilities tied to the IRGC and military-industrial capacity. Names of alleged senior officers killed have been floated in some reports. The transcript material lists figures such as Mohammed Pachpour and Amir Nazir Zadeh. Spellings here are likely uncertain, and those identifications remain unverified. Media coverage also references Mojtaba Khamenei as a potential successor figure mentioned in pre-existing succession plans. Again, that name appears with spelling and confirmation issues in initial reporting. Every one of these items should be read as an attributed claim until corroborated by multiple independent sources. How would Iran actually choose a new supreme leader? The constitutional mechanism is the Assembly of Experts, a clerical body tasked with selecting and overseeing the supreme leader. In practice, the Assembly has been aligned closely with the clerical establishment and the IRGC, but succession in a theocratic-autocratic system is as much about who controls coercive instruments, the IRGC, the regular army, security services, and the provincial command structure, as it is about formal ballots or declarations. Reports suggest Khamenei had prepared contingency plans and named trusted figures for succession. Whether those plans survive a sudden decapitation in good order is an open question. From here, three broad and competing scenarios stand out. Each is plausible. Each carries different regional consequences. 1. Consolidation by hardliners. The likely short-term outcome. What happens? The IRGC, possessing deep organizational reach and mid-level commanders embedded across the country, reasserts control. A loyalist cleric or a figure from Khamenei's inner circle, possibly including his son as some reports suggest, is elevated quickly. Security organs clamp down on protests, key command nodes remain intact, and the regime reestablishes a chain of command within days to weeks. Who benefits? The IRGC as an institution and hardline clerical elements who prefer continuity. External actors seeking predictability may find a diminished but coherent Tehran willing to negotiate under pressure. Probable timeline: days to weeks for initial consolidation, months to a year for visible policy shifts. Why this is likely? Authoritarian systems with disciplined security services often prioritize rapid restoration of order. The IRGC's command networks and control over provincial security make consolidation a realistic short-term outcome. 2. Fragmentation and internal power struggle. A possible destabilizing midline outcome. What happens? With the central authority removed, competing centers of power, IRGC factions, the regular army, pragmatic technocrats, regional clerics, and security ministries, vie for control. Provincial commanders or popular militias may assert autonomy. Assassinations, defections, and localized clashes could multiply. Who benefits? Opportunistic commanders, regional power brokers. Foreign proxies might exploit disorder to carve out influence. Probable timeline: weeks to months, with the highest danger of violent clashes concentrated in the first 30-90 days. Why this is possible? Iran's power is not monolithic. Rivalries between the IRGC's elite units and other security organs, combined with factional clerical politics and economic grievances, could widen into an unstable competition if no unifying figure or compact emerges. 3. Popular uprising and regime change, possible but less likely without military defections. What happens? Encouraged by external leaders calling for Iranians to rise, civilians and protest movements attempt to leverage the moment to force political change. Widespread street protests could coalesce with defections from security forces, bringing the regime to the brink. Who benefits? Civil society forces and opposition elements seeking systemic change. Probable timeline: immediate mobilization possible. Successful regime change depends on days to weeks, and crucially on splits within the armed forces. Why this is less likely? Popular protests alone rarely topple a regime unless security services fragment or abandon the ruling coalition. Outside calls for uprising can catalyze action, but without coordinated leadership and defections from coercive organs, mass mobilization may be brutally suppressed. Across all scenarios, a handful of key unknowns will determine which path unfolds. First, the cohesion of Iran's security apparatus. Will the IRGC Central Command hold? Will regional IRGC units, the Basij militia, and the regular army remain loyal to the same leadership? Second, the state of succession planning inside the clerical establishment. Are there ready, credible alternatives who can gain the Assembly of Experts' rapid backing and the IRGC's acceptance? Third, public reaction. Are protests localized celebrations or the opening salvo of sustained unrest? Fourth, external pressure. How will Israel proceed after claiming such a large operation, and what role will the United States play? Direct military support, diplomatic cover, or restraint to avoid broader escalation? And finally, the reliability of the initial claims. Photographic evidence and lists of killed commanders are being circulated but remain unverified by independent international sources. What are the regional implications to watch for now? If consolidation holds, Tehran's foreign policy may become more risk-averse, but equally driven by the IRGC's worldview. Continued support for allied militias in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, albeit with potential recalibration. If fragmentation occurs, proxy battlefields could flare as rival Iranian actors use external partners to secure influence, creating a patchwork of low-intensity conflicts. If a popular uprising gains traction and security forces split, the entire regional balance could shift unpredictably, producing refugee flows, cross-border skirmishes, and a scramble among regional powers to shape the post-Tehran order. Equally important are escalation risks. A decapitation strike, if confirmed, could prompt retaliatory attacks from pockets of Iranian forces or allied militias. Miscalculation is the most dangerous vector. Localized strikes or assassinations that are not transparently controlled can lead to cascading responses between states and proxies. International actors will be watching the Strait of Hormuz, shipping lanes, and allied proxy theaters for signs of spillover. So what should observers look for in the next 72 hours and beyond? First, independent confirmation of the central claim from multiple credible sources. Second, official statements and movements from the IRGC and the Ministry of Defense in Tehran. Public declarations, mobilization orders, or signs of command disarray. Third, activity by the Assembly of Experts, or the broader clerical establishment. Meeting notices, emergency communiques, or rapid endorsement of a successor. Fourth, social media and local reports from Iranian cities and border regions indicating protests, martial law, or checkpoints. And fifth, diplomatic signals from Washington, Jerusalem, Moscow, Beijing, and regional capitals. The degree of public coordination among external powers will shape escalation dynamics. In short, at this stage, consolidation by hardline elements is plausible and arguably the most probable short-term outcome because of the IRGC's institutional strength. Fragmentation remains a serious risk that could produce chaotic, prolonged instability. A popular uprising that leads to systemic change is possible but hinges on a decisive split inside the security apparatus. All of these projections are conditional and depend on facts that are still being confirmed. We will watch the incoming evidence closely. Verified reporting from neutral outlets, statements from Tehran's security leadership, and independent corroboration of any photographic or video material. For now, treat the headline, "Khamenei is dead," as a claim being asserted by President Trump and supported by Israeli statements and unverified media, not as an established and independently confirmed fact. If you want ongoing coverage as this develops, subscribe to get updates and vetted analysis. This story will evolve rapidly. The next few days will tell us whether Iran stabilizes under a succession compact, fractures into competing fiefdoms, or faces a genuine moment of popular challenge. Whatever unfolds, the regional balance of power and the rules that have governed Tehran's posture for decades may be changing in real time, and that demands careful, cautious monitoring of verified information. Please check the description for source links and share this with someone following the situation. We are monitoring the secret flight paths out of Tehran. Some high-ranking officials are reportedly fleeing. We will bring you those coordinates in our next update. Stay vigilant. Subscribe to Global Alert 24H.